Have you ever paused mid-toast and wondered if what you were lifting wasn't just a glass, but something far more consequential? What if the very act of drinking, so normalized, so embedded in celebration and sorrow alike, wasn't simply about taste or escape, but a subtle agreement made without your awareness? Not a contract inked in paper and pen, but one carved into the fabric of your energy, bound in frequencies that ripple through the unseen layers of your being. It's a notion that defies common narratives, yet it has echoed quietly through time, through sacred scrolls, forbidden manuscripts, and the whispers of mystics who dared to look deeper. They spoke of alcohol not as an innocent indulgence, but as a vibrational device, a spiritual catalyst with the power to uplift or to diminish. Esoteric scholars like Manly P. Hall and Helena Blavatsky weren't simply intellectuals, they were interpreters of veiled truths. In their worlds, alcohol wasn't defined by its chemical properties alone. It was understood as a manipulator of subtle energy, a disturber of the frequencies that align you with your higher intelligence. They wrote about Alol, a forgotten title cloaked in ancient tongues, referring not to liquid in a bottle, but to an essence, a spirit in the truest sense, one that doesn't just pass through the body, but interacts with your very core. It adjusts, disrupts, and even rewrites your energetic blueprint. Through centuries, cultures have revered and feared alcohol in equal measure. Some anointed it as divine nectar, using it sparingly during sacred ceremonies designed to dissolve the walls between dimensions. Others placed it in the hands of common revelry, where excess dulled minds and loosened tongues. These paradoxes coexisted because alcohol itself walks a double-edged path, capable of unlocking visionary states, but also of chaining one's soul to shadows unseen. When revered, it opened portals to other realms. When abused, it pulled people under into currents of confusion, fragmentation, and unseen bondage. To dismiss alcohol as just a beverage is to overlook its multidimensional nature. It's not merely altering neurotransmitters or impacting your liver, it's shifting the texture of your very being. Each time it enters your system, something subtle is modified. A gate creaks open, a veil thickens, an invitation is silently extended to entities and energies that do not come bearing gifts of clarity. Instead, they arrive cloaked in comfort, offering numbness where awareness once resided, wrapping you in illusion while loosening your grasp on who you truly are. Imagine your auric field, a pulsing, luminous extension of your life force, stretching around you like a protective cocoon. This field is your interface with the cosmos, a sacred boundary that filters, deflects, and integrates vibrations, both light and heavy. Now imagine what happens when alcohol enters your bloodstream. That field, once finely tuned and sturdy, begins to waver. It becomes porous. Weak spots form, like tears in a net. Through those breaches, foreign energies can drift in, subtle at first and then more persistent. These aren't metaphors, they are the lived reality of energetic interaction, a reality ancient systems of knowledge documented long before we had machines to measure it. Blavatsky spoke of alcohol as a severance agent, not in the physical sense, but in the spiritual. She observed how even small quantities could disconnect individuals from their inner guidance, veiling intuition and clouding perception. To her, alcohol created fog, a metaphysical condensation that dulled the radiance of the soul. Hall echoed similar concerns, warning that substances of power must never be used without deep reverence and precise intention, or else they become tools of distortion. And Rudolf Steiner, whose insights penetrated the spiritual architecture of humanity, compared the influence of alcohol to synthetic fire. Not warmth, but combustion without consciousness. It burns through memory, interrupts etheric alignment, and reroutes soul trajectories. This isn't about morality. It's not about shaming a drink or judging a moment of indulgence. It's about awareness, about seeing what has always been hidden in plain sight. Alcohol alters not just moods, but your magnetic compass. It draws you away from your internal North Star. The drink may end in laughter or sleep, but beneath the surface, layers of your soul are shifting in ways you cannot always retrieve. You might be asking, why is this knowledge not more widespread? If alcohol truly holds such energetic consequence, why isn't it spoken of with caution rather than celebration? The answer lies in a deeper current of forgetting. Over generations, wisdom once held in temples and mystery schools has been diluted or buried altogether. We've become skilled at naming symptoms, but blind to causes that exist beyond the material. The vibrational implications of substances like alcohol have been deliberately obscured because their truth challenges systems that profit from disconnection. When you are energetically weakened, you are easier to influence, easier to distract, easier to sell to. Modern life thrives on immediacy. The culture of now demands quick pleasure, fast relief, surface connection. Alcohol fits this rhythm perfectly. It lubricates conversations, dulls resistance, masks anxiety. But all this comes at a cost, and that cost is cumulative. The more frequently you alter your state through substances like this, the more your energetic defenses wear thin. What starts as celebration becomes habit. What feels like relaxation becomes detachment. Eventually, a kind of sleepwalking begins where the soul still whispers, but the ears no longer hear. And so, each sip is not merely a moment in time. It is a turning point, a subtle pivot toward or away from wholeness. The consequences may not erupt overnight, but like water carving stone, repetition shapes destiny. With every pour, you may be reinforcing patterns that fragment your alignment, not because the drink itself is evil, but because the context of its use lacks sacredness. When something powerful is handled without intention, it becomes unstable. When rites are stripped of their purpose and reduced to entertainment, they lose their magic and gain a shadow. In esoteric terms, alcohol creates resonance with lower vibrational frequencies. These frequencies are not passive. They carry forms, thought forms, emotional residues, and in more complex cases, consciousnesses without bodies. These subtle parasites thrive in energetic environments destabilized by alcohol. They cling to the cracks and ride the waves of your lowered vibration, whispering impulses that feel like your own but aren't. This is not fantasy. This is the metaphysics of influence. The real battle is not in resisting the drink, but in reclaiming awareness of what enters with it. Take, for example, the concept of the energetic pact. This is not a dramatic agreement signed in fire, but a quiet yielding. When you drink without consciousness, you signal openness, not to higher inspiration, but to interference. You become more permeable, more suggestible, more distant from your original frequency. And the longer you dwell in that altered vibration, the harder it becomes to remember who you were before. This is how fragmentation sets in, not in a moment, but over years through small acts of forgetfulness. Imagine trying to meditate after drinking. For some, it feels near impossible. The inner stillness won't come. The clarity remains elusive. That's because alcohol doesn't just affect brain chemistry. It muddles the ether. It clogs the channel. Where once there was flow, now there is static. Where once there was resonance, now there is echo. You can't force spiritual connection through a fog. You must clear the fog to hear the call. Now consider social environments where alcohol is ever present. Weddings, parties, networking events. They are structured as rites of passage or shared bonding, yet energetically they resemble open circuits, vulnerable to influence and disruption. Laughter may fill the air, but so too do invisible exchanges of energy, many of which leave participants feeling drained or disoriented the next day. This is not just a hangover. This is energetic residue, attachments formed in the absence of discernment, emotions absorbed that weren't even yours, mood swings inherited from a frequency you briefly occupied. This is why ancient schools of knowledge were so meticulous about ritual. They understood the sacredness of altered states. They trained initiates for years before exposing them to plant medicines or fermented elixirs, because to enter a different realm of consciousness without guidance is to wander blind through a forest filled with traps. And that's what most drinking today resembles. A blindfolded journey led by impulse, fueled by escape, ending in forgetfulness. But this isn't a message of abstinence. This is a message of awakening, of looking again at what has been normalized and asking if it truly serves your evolution. The question isn't, should I never drink again? The question is, am I willing to see what it does to my energy? Am I willing to reclaim the power of my field and choose experiences that elevate rather than deplete? You are not a machine. You are a symphony of vibration, a chorus of energies harmonized through choice and presence. When alcohol enters, it doesn't just tweak a setting, it shifts the entire song. For some, that may be a temporary modulation. For others, it becomes the dominant rhythm, drowning out the notes of authenticity. To reclaim your melody, you must be willing to listen. And through this reweaving, the influence of alcohol loses its grip. Not because you resist it, but because you outgrow it. Because the frequency of your being no longer matches its invitation. This path is not about perfection. It's about refinement, not judgment, but discernment. You are not being asked to reject joy or celebration, but to bring awareness into them, to transform unconscious habits into sacred choices, to remember that your body is not just flesh, but a vessel of soul, and what you pour into it becomes part of what you radiate into the world. The glass may still rise, but the question is, will your spirit rise with it, or fall silently beneath its weight? The echoes of unseen consequences rarely announce themselves with volume. They arrive quietly, layered into the hours that follow what felt like a harmless indulgence. At first, nothing seems amiss. The laughter was real. The moment was light. The clink of glass against glass felt like connection. But underneath that temporary warmth, something delicate begins to unravel. You may not notice it right away, but subtle distortions ripple outward, an unexplained heaviness in the chest, a fog around your thoughts, a subtle disinterest in spiritual pursuits you once cherished. These are not random occurrences. They are footprints left behind by what the esoteric world has long considered an energetic transaction, the price of temporarily stepping out of alignment. Alcohol does not simply vanish from your system once metabolized by the body. Its residue lingers in your field like ink on a page, smudging the patterns that hold your clarity in place. In the unseen layers of your being, those intricate structures that compose your etheric, astral, and mental bodies, small shifts accumulate. These are not detectable by the five senses, yet they shape how you think, feel, and interact with life. Imagine your energy field like an intricate weaving of light, constantly in motion, responsive to your choices. Now picture a single thread turning dull every time you drink. It may seem inconsequential at first, but when enough threads dim, the entire tapestry loses coherence. This isn't a metaphor pulled from fear or superstition. It's a reality known deeply by those who walk spiritual paths with intention. Mystics throughout history didn't shy away from the truth that what enters the body also enters the soul's story. Rudolf Steiner's words echo here, not as prophecy but as insight rooted in observation. He spoke of how alcohol simulates vitality without supporting the structure that sustains true life force. It creates the illusion of warmth while subtly burning the scaffolding of memory, interfering with your inner continuity. Think of it like artificial sunlight. It warms, yes, but also blinds and fades if absorbed without limit. These teachings weren't designed to instill shame. They were meant to awaken discernment, to offer a lens for understanding that the sacred doesn't vanish simply because society rebrands it as casual. To the mystic, nothing is casual. Every choice radiates consequences through the subtle planes. And alcohol, despite its social normalization, holds the potential to become a conduit for energies that thrive in distraction and disorientation. In altered states without guidance, you don't merely lose your bearings, you sometimes adopt patterns and influences not native to your soul. Picture your consciousness as a finely tuned signal, much like a radio dial aligned to a specific frequency. In this state, intuition flows, dreams hold clarity, synchronicities arrive with timing that feels divine. But after consuming alcohol, that tuning wavers. Static enters. The messages become jumbled. You may still receive impressions, but their source is questionable. Are they echoes of your higher self, or projections caught from a lower band of reality? This confusion is the real cost, not the headache or fatigue, but the distance it creates between you and your inner compass. And this distance widens over time, not necessarily through abuse or addiction, but through the quiet repetition of small compromises. A toast here, a celebration there, the belief that moderation protects you. But what protects your liver may not safeguard your soul. Energetic distortion doesn't require excess, it only requires forgetfulness. When you no longer view your body as sacred space and your energy as sacred current, you open the door without realizing it. That door does not swing open dramatically. It shifts slightly, enough to let in voices not aligned with your purpose. In esoteric texts, this is described as creating resonance with disembodied thought forms, energies created by collective emotion, ancestral trauma, and unprocessed psychic debris. They are not malevolent in the theatrical sense. They are simply persistent frequencies that feed off instability. When you lower your energetic signature, you become a match for these vibrations. They don't possess you in cinematic fashion. They merge subtly, embedding impulses, mood shifts, self-doubt. And because they arrive quietly, you accept them as your own. This is how spiritual inertia takes root. You may begin to notice patterns that repeat. Unresolved emotional cycles, procrastination on your spiritual practices, a growing indifference toward inner work. These are not personal failures, they are symptoms of energetic entanglement. The more frequently you drink, the more normalized these states become. They blend into your personality, eroding the boundary between your essence and the noise that clings to it. This is what Blavatsky described as the veil thickening, not a punishment, but a natural result of repeated disconnection. Some traditions compare the energetic impact of alcohol to the effect of standing in polluted water. At first the temperature is fine, the surface calm, but stay long enough and the impurities begin to absorb through your skin. Similarly, when you dwell in an altered state, often, even mildly, you absorb more than you release. And the soul, which longs for elevation, finds itself dragging energetic weight it cannot trace. This weight doesn't manifest as drama. It appears as fatigue, confusion, apathy, the slow forgetting of what you came here to do. But what if you could remember? What if you paused long enough to examine not just how alcohol feels in the moment, but what it leaves behind? What if you treated your body not as a container for experience, but as a temple of alignment, where every substance must pass through the gate of your awareness before being allowed entry? This is the invitation hidden within this reflection, not abstinence for its own sake, but sacred accountability for your own vibration. There's a reason why spiritual masters across cultures approached altered states with ceremony. From shamans to monks, from desert mystics to Taoist sages, substances that change perception were used sparingly, with reverence, intention, and preparation. There was no casual glass of wine. There was only medicine or poison, depending entirely on the presence of the sacred. Today, that reverence has been replaced with habit. The ritual has been stripped of its soul, and all that remains is the shell, a behavior once holy, now hollow. But even within this emptiness, the potential for awakening remains. It begins with awareness, honest, uncompromising, gentle awareness. You are not broken for having enjoyed the comfort of a drink. You are not lost because you've leaned on it to soften your edges. You are simply invited now to see the full spectrum of its effect. Not just the smiles and loosening of the tongue, but the energetic erosion that may be occurring beneath the surface. Imagine your soul as a flame, bright, eternal, yet delicate in its exposure. Every substance, every action is either a wind that feeds this fire or a mist that dims it. Alcohol, for many, becomes a mist. It doesn't extinguish, but it veils. It makes the light harder to see, not only for others, but for you. And in that dimness, you forget the path. You forget the sound of your own voice echoing from the sacred within, and the forgetting is where the real danger lies. That's why ancient seers and visionaries emphasized discipline, not to control, but to preserve, not to limit experience, but to deepen it. They understood that the human vessel is not just biological, it is vibrational, sacred, intricate. What enters it leaves impressions, and those impressions shape what becomes possible. To drink without reflection is to invite chaos to compose your melody, to pause, to ask, to feel before you consume. That is the act of reclaiming sovereignty, and sovereignty is not control, it is alignment. When your choices match your purpose, you are sovereign. When your vibration is steady, your clarity remains. When you live from that space, you don't reject pleasure. You elevate it. You don't demonize the drink. You decide whether it deserves a place in your temple. And most often, clarity chooses stillness over escape, presence over numbness, depth over noise. This is not a sermon. This is a reminder that your soul did not come here to forget. It came to embody, to remember, to rise. And anything that consistently pulls you away from that embodiment, however pleasurable, must be examined, not judged. Examined. From love, from truth, from the quiet knowing that the highest version of you is not found at the bottom of a glass, but in the stillness between breaths. When you cultivate that stillness, your field begins to heal, your dreams sharpen, your decisions align, your heart beats in rhythm with your purpose. And in that rhythm, you no longer seek to blur the edges of your reality. You seek to feel them, to explore them, to create through. This trust is your compass. It leads you through temptation without force. It whispers when something doesn't feel aligned. It helps you say no with grace, not resistance. And in time, it transforms your relationship, not only with alcohol, but with every aspect of your life. Because when your energy is clear, your life becomes a mirror of that clarity. The people, opportunities, and insights that come to you arrive not by chance, but by resonance. So if you've wondered why certain paths feel blocked, why spiritual practices feel stale, why joy feels muted, it may not be because you lack effort. It may be because your field is cluttered, not with things visible to the eye, but with remnants of choices made unconsciously. And the good news is, Nothing is permanent. Energy moves. Fields shift. Healing is always one conscious breath away. In that breath, you find the invitation to be present, to be real, to be awake, not perfect, not rigid, just awake. Awake enough to notice when your energy dips, to observe without shame, to choose again with love. That's the essence of spiritual maturity, not flawless behavior, but full ownership. You have that power, always have. You are not at the mercy of habit. You are the architect of frequency. Each decision a brick, each thought a blueprint, each intention a beam of light shaping the space within and around you. With this awareness, you can rebuild, you can repair, you can rise. Even if you've walked this path with a drink in hand, you can set it down now and feel the floor beneath you again. You can listen to the silence and realize it's not empty, it's full of guidance. You can look into your own eyes and see not guilt, but recognition. The you before the forgetting, the you who never stopped waiting for your return. This is your moment. This is your step back into alignment. The drink may remain in the world, but it no longer defines your connection to it. You've remembered, and in that remembrance, everything shifts. There comes a time when the glow fades, not from the lights overhead or the flicker of candles in a room full of people, but from within. It happens slowly, subtly. The dullness creeps in like fog on a still morning, unnoticed at first, until it swallows the edges of everything you thought was sharp. The soul, once vibrant and reaching outward like roots seeking sunlight, begins to retract. And often, the cause isn't some grand catastrophe or tragic fall. It's the repetition of a choice that seems harmless, even ordinary. The slow seep of something that was never neutral. Alcohol doesn't always come with fanfare. Sometimes it comes dressed as laughter, connection, the clink of glass meeting glass under soft music and easier smiles. But what if behind that celebration was a quiet undoing? It is not always in the chaos that things fall apart. More often, it is in the comfort, in the unexamined moments, in the normalization of energy leaks. That's where it begins. A single evening where awareness drifts. A subtle shift in how deeply you feel your own truth. A meditation that won't take root the morning after. And while one instance alone may not feel like erosion, repeated many times, it becomes sediment, a dulling film that settles over clarity. What was once crystalline turns cloudy. What used to flow like a stream of intuitive insight begins to feel clogged, erratic, untrustworthy. And what causes this? Not merely the substance itself, but the agreement beneath it, that silent contract made without words. Every time the glass touches your lips, you say yes to something, even if unconsciously. Yes to relaxation, yes to numbness, yes to a momentary blurring of the edges of your reality. But in that yes, you also invite entry, not just to altered chemistry, but to altered vibration. And vibration is everything. It determines what thoughts have access to your mind, what emotions rise easily, what decisions feel right, what dreams are allowed to speak. Each time you compromise the frequency of your energy field, you become more suggestible, not just to other people's opinions, but to energies that do not have your growth in mind. The world is filled with vibrations looking for a host. Collective fear, ancestral trauma, unresolved archetypes, and stagnant emotions linger in the unseen dimensions of this reality. And when your field is porous, they attach. Not with claws, but with whispers. Not with force, but with resonance. They don't shout, they suggest, they nudge. They plant seeds of hesitation, insecurity, craving, and forgetfulness. What begins as a single night of letting go can spiral into a pattern of losing touch with your own compass. Soon decisions are made that don't quite feel like yours. Emotions arise that feel foreign. yet somehow rooted. And you begin to lose the thread of your own inner narrative. Your story begins to fragment, not catastrophically, but in soft, almost imperceptible ways. The sacred practices that used to ground you now feel like effort. Your dreams become foggy. Your meditations seem shallow, and slowly you start to wonder where the light went. But it didn't go anywhere. It was covered, veiled. Like the sun behind storm clouds, your brilliance remains intact. The work is not to generate light. It is to lift the mist. And to do that, you must become conscious of what calls the mist in. Alcohol, through the lens of spiritual energy, is one such caller. It invites the fog under the guise of freedom. And freedom, when distorted, becomes indulgence without awareness. This is not a condemnation, it is an invitation to see with new eyes, to understand that every so-called escape has a price, and the cost is rarely what you expect. In the traditions of ancient mystics, nothing was ever merely physical. The body was seen as a vessel, the mind as a translator, but the energy field was the real stage of transformation. Everything began and ended there. And anything that altered that field without sacred intention was considered dangerous, not because it was evil, but because it left you unguarded. Open, yes, but not in the way that leads to expansion. Open in the way that lets debris float in unnoticed, accumulating until the soul feels muffled. And this is where the cumulative nature of alcohol's impact becomes important. One night may feel inconsequential, but 10, 20, a lifetime of casual sips? These become patterns, and patterns become identity. Without noticing, you shift from someone who connects easily with their intuition to someone who questions every impulse, from someone whose presence uplifts a room to someone who feels drained after every interaction. And it's not because you've changed. It's because your frequency has. The most dangerous part of this process is how normalized it becomes. Society doesn't just accept alcohol, it glorifies it. It markets it as sophistication, celebration, and even romance. Entire industries are built on the idea that altered states are necessary to feel alive, and so you don't question it. You reach for the glass like everyone else, but the soul always knows. The soul feels the tremor, the breach, the crack in the foundation, and eventually it begins to withdraw, not out of punishment, but in protection. This withdrawal is subtle at first, a lack of motivation, a disinterest in spiritual growth, a numbness that creeps in even during joyful moments. Over time, it can become a kind of spiritual amnesia, a forgetting of your own depth. You begin to live from the surface, bouncing between obligations, pleasures, and distractions, and all the while the deeper part of you waits, patient, eternal, unmoved, but quieted. To reawaken it, you must clear the fog. And that begins with honesty, not shame, not regret. Just the simple act of acknowledging that something has been veiling your brilliance, something you welcomed, something that came in smiling but left you fragmented. And in that recognition, something shifts. The fog lifts slightly. The light begins to filter through, not all at once, but steadily. You may feel the urge to stop drinking entirely, or you may choose to engage with it more consciously. Either way, the key is awareness, the recognition that you are not just a body navigating experience. You are a field of energy, crafting reality, and every input matters. Every influence shapes the signal you emit into the world. The clearer the signal, the more aligned your experience is, the more distorted the field, the more chaotic the mirror life holds up to you. This is the heart of energetic sovereignty, the knowing that you are the curator of what enters your space, not just physically, but vibrationally. And alcohol, though legal, common, and even ritualized, often bypasses that gate. It walks in unexamined and rearranges the furniture of your soul, not violently, just subtly. And subtle shifts, repeated enough, become seismic. The mystics knew this. They taught that discipline wasn't about deprivation, it was about clarity. When you fasted, it wasn't to punish the body, it was to amplify the signal. When you meditated, it wasn't to escape life, but to anchor into its truest form. And when you refrained from mind-altering substances, it wasn't because they were evil. It was because they made it harder to hear the voice that matters most, the one within. Alcohol lowers your vibration, not just emotionally, but metaphysically. It slows the spin of your chakras, mutes your third eye, and distorts your crown's reception. It may feel like connection in the moment, but that connection is often horizontal, not vertical. It binds you to collective emotion, not divine intelligence. And the more you drink, the harder it becomes to differentiate between what's yours and what's absorbed. This is where energetic hygiene becomes critical. Just as you wash your body, so too must you cleanse your field. This can be done through meditation, breathwork, nature immersion, sacred sound. But most importantly, it requires vigilance, a willingness to ask, is this feeling truly mine? Is this thought rooted in my truth or inherited from a vibration I once invited in? And when you begin to ask those questions, something extraordinary happens. The fog doesn't just lift, it reveals what it was hiding, your original frequency, that unique resonance only you carry. The song your soul came here to sing. And when you remember it, even faintly, the desire to escape begins to dissolve, because you no longer need to leave yourself to feel alive. You become the source, the fire, the fullness. In this state, joy returns, not as a performance, but as a quiet power. Connection deepens, not through substances, but through shared presence. And celebration takes on a new meaning, not an excuse to alter consciousness, but an opportunity to expand it. You begin to see that what you were chasing through a drink was never out there. It was always within, waiting. And so you walk forward, not in rigid denial, but in reverent choice. You may still lift a glass someday, but you will do so with sacred intent, not absent-minded habit. You will know the stakes, you will feel the shifts, and you will choose alignment again and again, because it feels better than any numbness ever could. This is the power of awakening, not to reject the world, but to re-enter it with eyes open, field clear, soul sovereign. To remember that every act is a ritual, every choice a prayer, every vibration a brushstroke on the canvas of your becoming. There is a moment, quiet, still, almost unremarkable, when a person wakes up not just from sleep, but from an old agreement. A pattern they've repeated so often it wrapped itself around their identity like a second skin. In this stillness, something begins to loosen. The hands no longer reach reflexively for the comfort they once knew. The fog that used to feel like safety starts to taste like silence in the worst way, not peace but absence. And in that absence, a truth rises, undeniable. The drink that once seemed like a small escape was never small at all. It was a doorway. And not every door leads to light. When we explore the journey of reclaiming spiritual clarity, we must acknowledge how deeply woven alcohol has become into the very concept of freedom. We've been taught to associate it with laughter, reward, stress relief, and even love. It toasts achievements, smooths heartbreaks, softens the rough edges of life. But underneath that social fabric lies a frequency that whispers not of expansion, but contraction. Not because alcohol is inherently evil, but because it functions as a binder, a slow adhesive between your spirit and everything it was meant to release. Picture for a moment an individual with immense spiritual potential. Maybe it's you, maybe it's someone you know. They meditate, seek truth, crave wisdom. And yet, each weekend or social function brings with it a glass, just one, maybe two. Each time, a barely noticeable shift occurs. The dreams once vivid become fragmented. The drive for inner work fades slightly. The synchronicities become fewer or harder to interpret. It's not dramatic. That's what makes it dangerous. It's not a crash. It's a drift. And soon they don't feel quite like themselves anymore, though they can't say why. That is how the energetic contract reveals itself, not as punishment, but as persistent distance from your essence. These agreements are not etched in stone, but in repetition. Each act of unconscious indulgence strengthens the bond, and with every reaffirmed cycle, the vibration lowers just a bit more. But what's extraordinary is this: the moment you become aware of the agreement, you gain the power to dissolve it. Recognition is liberation. Once you see that your field has been altered, not by fate but by a choice, you are no longer its captive. You become its alchemist. And this is where everything changes, because awareness is not passive, it is disruptive. It unsettles illusions, no matter how long they've been nurtured. It exposes the hidden toll behind what seemed like harmless habits. And in its light, the invitation becomes clear, not to withdraw from life, but to engage with it fully, present, vibrating, awake. Imagine entering a room, your field strong, your presence undiluted. You sense the subtle energies before words are spoken. You discern the authentic from the superficial without analysis. This is what happens when your energy is intact, when your system is no longer blurred by substances that twist perception. You move through life with the clarity of still water. You become a tuning fork for truth, and falsehood recoils in your presence. The sages of old didn't guard sacred rituals because they were elitist. They did so because they understood that spiritual power requires stability, that altered states are not toys but thresholds, that to ingest a substance that modulates perception without anchoring in purpose is to set sail with no compass. Alcohol, in this context, becomes the rogue current. It does not carry you where you intend to go. It pulls you where your anchors are weak. And perhaps this is why so many spiritual traditions either limited or completely abstained from alcohol. Because they valued not only the mind, but the subtle body. They honored the sanctity of the vibrational field. They knew that what touches the lips also touches the soul, that every substance carries a signature, and alcohol's signature, though smooth and sociable on the surface, often conceals frequencies of disconnection, avoidance, and delay. This isn't about fear. It's about precision. If your goal is to awaken, to evolve, to remember who you truly are, then every tool, every ritual, every input must support that aim. Anything that veils, distracts, or diminishes your connection must be seen clearly for what it is: a detour. And detours, while not always dangerous, are rarely efficient. They cost time, energy, and in the realm of spirit, they cost momentum. But what if you've already taken that detour? What if you've spent years, even decades, using alcohol to soften the world's sharp edges? Then this message isn't here to judge you, it's here to call you back. Back to the clarity that once felt natural. Back to the practices that brought you peace. Back to the frequency that was yours before the mists settled in. And the way back is not paved in guilt, it's walked in truth. Start by observing, not with shame, but with curiosity. What thoughts follow a drink? What feelings persist the next day? How easily do you access your inner guidance afterward? What dreams fade? What intuitions you once trusted now feel muffled? These are not coincidences, they are indicators. They are signals from your higher intelligence telling you something is interfering with the signal. Then begin the reclamation, not in force, but in devotion. Return to your breath, return to your body. Sit in stillness and invite your energy to realign. Use sound, nature, movement, whatever tools reawaken your presence. And as you do, you'll feel something remarkable, your field strengthening, your clarity sharpening, your joy becoming less dependent on stimulation and more rooted in essence. You will no longer need alcohol to feel free because you will have remembered the kind of freedom that doesn't dissipate when the bottle is empty. A freedom born not from escape, but from embodiment. From living fully in your own frequency, unclouded, unshaken. And from this place, everything changes. Relationships deepen because you are no longer masking your energy. Your creativity expands because inspiration flows through an unobstructed channel. Your decisions align because intuition no longer has to fight its way through fog. And perhaps most importantly, your sense of self becomes rooted not in mood or performance, but in vibration. You'll begin to notice that the more time you spend in this clear state, the less appealing the drink becomes. Not because you force it away, but because it no longer matches your field. You have risen above its pull, and in doing so, you've reclaimed your throne. Because that's what sovereignty is. A return to your natural state of alignment, a remembering that your essence was never meant to be diluted, only expressed. And in this expression, you begin to radiate, not in a way that seeks attention, but in a way that commands presence. Your energy speaks before you do. Your vibration enters rooms before your footsteps. You become not just a person, but a frequency. One that cannot be manipulated, drained, or dimmed by outside forces. One that protects itself not with walls, but with awareness. That's the ultimate freedom. Not the right to choose anything, but the clarity to choose what truly serves. To stand in a space where your soul is louder than your habits, where your light is not hidden behind behavior, but poured into every act. That's the freedom we chase in glasses, in crowds, in moments of release, and yet it was never out there. It was always within, waiting. So now you stand at the threshold. You've seen what alcohol takes. You've felt what it covers. You've touched the truth beneath the veil. And the question is no longer, should I stop drinking? The question is, what version of myself do I want to empower? Every time you reach for a drink, you reinforce a self that needs escape. Every time you choose presence, you nourish a self that can hold everything. Pain, joy, transition, celebration, without collapse. And the more you feed that self, the more your world transforms. Because the outer is always a reflection of the inner. When your energy is cluttered, your path feels foggy. When your energy is clear, doors open, not because of luck, but because of resonance. You call in experiences that match your field. You attract relationships that respect your light. You make decisions that align with destiny rather than distraction. And it all begins with one choice, one moment of awareness, one decision to honor your vibration over your conditioning. You don't need to declare yourself sober forever. You just need to choose clarity now, and then again and again, until it's not a struggle, but a standard. This is how energetic sovereignty is built, not in grand declarations, but in consistent alignment. In the daily remembrance that your body is a temple, your soul is sacred, and your frequency is your signature. Let that signature be undistorted. Let it sing in its full octave. Let it be the lighthouse that guides you, not away from the world, but deeper into it, with eyes wide, heart open, spirit clear. And if ever the fog returns, as it may, you will know what to do. You will recognize its texture. You will remember the cost, and you will choose differently. Not from fear, from wisdom. That wisdom is yours now. It always was. You've simply lifted the glass to the light and seen, finally, what it contained.